Look, I've joined like the 2010s. I got an Apple Watch last night. I mean,
all right.
Let's see how that heart rate goes during this. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
I'm Arizona Family political editor Dennis Welch.
Dennis, fake news Welch. Try to tell the truth.
And this is the Politics Unplugged podcast.
Dennis, if you have a problem with substance abuse, I am more than willing to talk to you anytime you need.
And welcome back to another edition of Politics Unplugged, the podcast episode. And I'm joined this week with Barrett, Marson, and Tony Cani. And if you don't know what political affiliations they are, Barrett, you're the resident Republican, Tony, resident Democrat. Thanks for joining us here. Big week coming up. Let's kind of set the table here. We've got presidential preference election, even though there's absolutely no drama left at both of the major presidential candidates, Joe Biden and Donald Trump, have locked up the nomination and are officially the presumptive nominees for their party's nominations. But going alongside with that, we've got President Joe Biden coming out here on the PPE. So let's start with that first and foremost. Tony, what's the president hoping to get out of a visit here on the PPE at this point in the campaign?
It's going to be the first official day of the general election here in Arizona. I mean, and he's going to. So it's smart for him to come, I think, on that day because there's going to be news coverage of the primary, no matter how it ends, and his visit will be a part of it. And so he's going to be coming a lot. He only came once in 2020. Mm-hmm. He did a lot of virtual stuff, and Kamala came twice. But he's already been here a ton of times during his administration. So I think we're going to be seeing a lot of Air Force One over the next year.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's a lot compared to, Biden, like you said, came here once in the 2020. What's a lot? Three times? Four times?
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he had 5 visits. I mean, I think it's going to be a crazy cycle for us.
Yeah, and let's get the Republican take on this. Bear, where do you see the Biden at in Arizona with the presidential election? How is he positioned at this point? What do you see as the vulnerabilities? What do you see as the strengths for the Democrat presidential nominee and current incumbent President Joe Biden?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Dennis. I notice I'm good enough for the podcast, but not the television show. But thanks for having me on anyway.
Jeez, wow. Why am I?
Joe Biden's biggest strength is, of course, Donald Trump. Gas prices have come down since their historic high last year, but they are a little bit on the rise these days. And interest rates are eking down, inching, crawling, creeping down, but they are still at levels we haven't seen in 15 years. I think those are strong headwinds for Joe Biden nationally and particularly in Arizona. And look, as someone who has never voted for Donald Trump and never will, I think Joe Biden has an uphill climb here in Arizona. Mm-hmm. I think he's got some problems. I think his biggest strength is he's not he's not Donald Trump, and the economy is improving. But what we haven't seen is, I know it's an ugly word, but deflation. Mm-hmm. Right, egg prices are still $3 to $4 a dozen, right? And I think that's going to be those kinds of things are going to be a problem for Joe Biden here in Arizona.
Tony, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that cost of living is a big issue. Housing, it's going to be a battle on who do you blame. Who do you blame for this? And I think there's a lot of data that shows that a lot of the inflation came from corporations that were jacking up their prices to sort of take advantage of the moment. I mean, you look at the profits of these corporations are through the roof, but they've been increasing the cost of their products, and they've been, he talked in the State of the Union about shrinkflation, I think he called it, where sizes of things were going. And so, that's going to be the campaign.
I was told size doesn't matter.
Oh, God.
So,
are you going to go Seinfeld shrinkage now?
Look, I know we can vilify corporations. I know that's popular, but corporations have been around, for even longer than you and me, Tony, and prices weren't this high, and so I think that's going to be he can try to vilify those corporations.
I don't know if it's going to be about
problem.
vilifying the corporations
You
as much
just
as
were vilifying corporations.
I think that there's
corporations are taking advantage of people.
There's a public. I will certainly.
Wow,
vilify
Republican
them.
hot take.
I think that
Republican
there's-
corporations are taking advantage of people.
No, that's I'm quoting him.
That's right.
Okay,
The Democrats.
They
said that.
did take advantage of it, but I mean, I think that there is a growing perception that that's the case. But you're right. Like, if people are going to blame Joe Biden, he's going to be in a tough spot. There are economic wins that he's had.
Mm-hmm.
There are infrastructure wins that he's had. There's the CHIPS Act, the fact that we have the fastest growing manufacturing sector in the country right now in Maricopa County. These are things that he can take some credit for, and it's the question about whether or not voters are going to buy it.
He can take credit for him. He just voters aren't giving. He can tell voters, this is what I did, and voters aren't responding to that. I don't necessarily know why, because I agree. I mean, we have TSMC in North Phoenix. We've got a couple of other great infrastructure investment or chips investment money that's coming here. But Joe Biden is getting zero credit for it.
Yeah, it is strange he's not getting a lot of credit for that. I did see an AP story about saying that the economy is better, inflation has crept down, production GDP's up, Dow Jones is up, all this other stuff, but Americans just don't feel really bullish about the future, and a lot of that, according to this AP story, has to do with housing.
Housing is
is at the core of so much.
Look. I always talk about this. My parents back in 1968, they bought their house. They were paying about 14% interest rate.
Yeah.
That's ungodly today, right?
Yeah.
But
Look
who
at the
remembers?
cost, the relative cost of that house
but
back then.
they bought it with like 12 raspberries.
Right, exactly. no doubt. But but people don't remember 1968, and if you do, it just means you weren't doing enough drugs.
I don't remember
drugs
1968.
Anyway. But people do remember 3 years ago when money was cheap, when it was sub 3%.
Well, I think Arizonans, as we talk politics about Arizonans, and particularly in Maricopa County, remember just a few years ago, not that long ago, when houses were cheap here.
Yes. Houses were, look, they were increasing in value, but money was still cheap. You could get a sub 3% interest rate, so it wasn't so bad. Now, that same house that, maybe was $300,000 5 years ago is $500,000 now, but the interest rate is in not 3, it's now 7. And that alone makes about $1,000 difference. And you're not getting not getting anything more for that. It's just all going to the bank. Well,
let me ask you though, Barry. You'd mentioned at the top that you're a Republican. You never voted for Trump, and you never will. Why is it that a lot of Republicans are ride or die with this guy?
Because
it's one of the.
I mean,
boy.
Some people have, some people, 30, 40 years ago, whatever that was, drank the Kool-Aid and died with their cult leader.
Jonestown?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I mean, again, most of your listeners probably won't even know.
Your young Gen Z political podcast audience.
Yeah.
They're not going to.
This is way, this is like ancient history. But here, so many, Donald Trump is fighting. Mm-hmm. It's a bad fight, but he is fighting, and he is a fighter, and he's a puncher, and a lot of older Republicans, quite frankly, younger Republicans, like that. Mm-hmm. They want that. They feel that they are losing the country, and they want a fighter, and Donald Trump is doing that. I think he's just fighting the wrong things.
But I'm just still trying to understand the voter, because it's the question. It's the political laws of physics don't apply to the man.
They don't.
I mean, he's been twice impeached. He's been,
forget that. When look, a child of the 70s, 1970s for you young kids out there. It's a long time ago. You were taught to revere that black flag that had the POW, MIA images on it, right? And when he was in, I believe it was Iowa, and he said that John McCain, he liked his war heroes who weren't captured.
Yeah.
And that didn't sink him. There was nothing that would. Republicans especially totally value those POW, MIA people from especially Vietnam, and to all of a sudden throw them aside. I don't think you can. I don't think it's impossible to say John McCain was not a war hero, and yet here you had a guy saying that, and then all of a sudden, throngs of his supporters believe that a guy who spent 5 years or whatever it was in the Hanoi Hilton and was tortured, and even given the opportunity to be released, said no. That guy, my compadre here came in before me. He gets to go before me. I mean, I'm sitting here looking at 3 draft dodgers right now, and we would have taken that offer, lickety split and say, hey, we're out, yo. We would not last.
For the record, I have never dodged the draft. I did, in fact, file for selective service when I was 18 years old.
I did too. But I think that when Donald Trump got away with that and was even stronger after he said that, he could, literally go down Fifth Avenue, shoot someone, and still be more popular.
But it did hurt him in the general election in Arizona. It certainly did.
Sure.
And it hurt him with some Republicans, but what the polling showed in the campaign is it hurt him a lot with independents, and it hurt him with even some Democrats.
It's still one of those questions, though.
I'm talking about the base.
No, you're right. I think even aside from all, I agree with what you're saying, even the cult stuff. There's also been a 10-year, 8-year, whatever effort to undermine reality, right? The people who are supposed to be holding elected officials accountable, media, institutions, organizations, you could show somebody a video of Trump or one of his people saying something and they won't believe it.
Absolutely.
They won't believe it. That applies to the head of the Senate in Arizona too, right? It applies to some of the people who are in leadership in the Republican Party. They just don't believe what they see, and whether they're playing a part or whether over a course of 10 years, the sort of degrading of these institutions that are meant to sort of keep our democracy working, our fragile republic going, that stuff's been pushed away, and so people just don't believe some of the things that normally they would be.
Well, think about this. We're almost a decade removed from when he came down the golden escalator. I mean, almost a decade. And I'm still wondering, why people still are so beholden to the Republicans, so beholden or supportive of this guy. I got 2016 looking back. You get that. He's a fresh face on the political scene like that. Wants to shake things up. He's talking to this or that. A lot of voters were like, well, we want to move forward. I don't want to see another Clinton in the White House. Let's move forward. Let's give this guy, an outsider, a chance at that point. But now there's a 4-year record of him. He's been impeached twice. He's facing all these legal battles of trying to overturn and usurp an election. What's the appeal now?
That is the appeal. Right there. That's the appeal, is that, again, he's fighting, and he's fighting for me. Right? He's fighting for us. And I just think that he can do no wrong to throngs of supporters. I thought maybe when he turned on, when he was flip-flopped on TikTok, I thought, well, that might wake some people up, because some people are so vitriolically opposed to TikTok because of China, blah, 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 whatever. And even, he on a whim says, what, TikTok is great.
Well, and it's transparent. He has a big donor who is affiliated with the company.
Sure, I understand that, but I don't understand all of the House Republicans, congressional Republicans are pretty. I think they 15 of them only voted against the TikTok bill, if I'm not mistaken. So they didn't listen to Trump. Those House Republicans, curiously, didn't listen to Trump on this one, because they, for years, have been blasting TikTok as a arm of the Chinese government. So,
well, there's concern about there's concern in Congress about TikTok having access to sensitive information about Americans and whatnot, and that's an interesting bill. It's what passed the House. It's in the Senate now.
Whether it gets heard, and we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. And that's an interesting. That could be a different show. The interesting topic on that, like how does that play with young voters? Well, a lot of people. There's 170 million people on TikTok.
Yeah, and young people that are on TikTok are very upset about this. And part of the reason is because, and actually, I think that you'll see that it's TikTok users, regardless of age. You know, they tend to be younger, but they're frustrated with it. And part of it is because if you are like somebody who grew up in the world of social media, you didn't know anything different. They're pretty aware of the fact that all these other corporations have their data, that these other corporations, like, so basically what this bill does, what critics will say is, oh, okay, so, a Chinese government affiliated business can just buy this data from Facebook and then it's okay. Like, that's the kind of thing that is driving some of the frustration.
But going back to, Barrett's favorite decade, the 70s or even the 80s, I mean, would they have allowed?
Oh, I'm so anti-80s.
Yeah, I do.
No, the 80s were bad. The 70s were, pretty. I had a good fro going and everything, even as a kid. Oh, it was great.
But would the country have allowed, like, China to Chinese investors to buy NBC? Because we live in a different world now, and this is a big media giant. It's social media, but it's still a media giant. Is TikTok?
Well, I mean, look, that's quite frankly, that is a great question, and sometimes I wonder, like, does it matter that China knows that I log my weight in every day, and and some health, someone like, is Xi Jinping looking at, boy, this guy in Arizona, he really needs to lose some weight faster than that.
Well, I mean,
I don't
the
know
aggregation of data can be used in a campaign to influence people.
Yeah.
You know how I know? Because we do it. Right? Because people do it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the Jake Hoffman, who is the most powerful guy in the Senate, the Republican head of the Freedom Caucus, he was banned from these social media companies because he,
Troll farmer.
He created a troll farmer. He hired American young people that he got money from American political entities, and he, spent his money on American companies, Twitter and Facebook, to sort of do this stuff. And so, like, I think that this exists. It's a legitimate concern. I think that the other part of it with young people, especially when this first started coming up, was this is a generation of people that have been struggling economically. Like they're worried about the cost of college. They don't know if college is worth it, all this kind of stuff. But they've also been taught since before they could read, how to deal with whether or not someone is going to come in their school and shoot them. Mm-hmm. And they haven't seen, and so there's things like that, and many of them are concerned about climate change. I mean, whatever the thing is, they're seeing Congress act on this, and they're frustrated with that sort of what they perceive as an imbalance when it comes to this. They're like, why can't we get those other things done when they're going to do this? And that's where the frustration is.
And it's nice that they're getting politically engaged. I mean, they may be 14 years old and can't vote now, but they called their senator, they called their congressman. It's great that they even know who their congresswoman. So that is, I guess that's a plus.
There's another battle that's playing out. I think I've talked about it here before, which is that, like, in 2020 and 2022, the gap between the youngest voters, their vote choice, and the vote choice of the generation that was their parents' age was bigger than it has ever been in American history. Where typically young people tend to be a little bit more democratic, a little bit more progressive, but they're not as different than their parents as they have been. Like, a massive, massive gap. And so I think a lot of the things that we've been seeing play out in politics is people trying to figure out why, especially on the Republican side. I think this is part of the reason why there's these attacks on public schools, part of the reason why, they're very concerned about what's happening at universities, is because there's people trying to understand why what I think are antiquated views that they've held, some of these conservative Republicans, are not held by their kids and their kids' generation. And it's leading to some stress and some discomfort, and they can't be me. It's got to be something on the outside. And, and that's led to this. And I think that's a big part of what's fueling a lot of the sort of frustration with TikTok.
All right, let's shift the conversation over, the nice segue for that is just to remind people that Ruben Gallego voted against the TikTok ban. He was one of 63 members of the House who voted against that. So let's talk a little bit about Ruben Gallego's Senate race. He's out with a new ad this week. It's a minute long, 60-second spot, $1 million buy through the end of the month. It is the type of ad that goes through his biography. It starts as his time growing up, the odd jobs he took growing up, his time in the service, and his time at Harvard, and him being a father and raising a family and whatnot. What'd you think of the ad that you saw? Because it's also getting some criticism from folks who said, well, the border's not even mentioned in the ad.
Well, look, it's an introductory ad. It's a biographical ad. So I don't have a problem that there isn't a lot of policy
Yeah.
Pieces in there. I didn't think it was a great ad. I thought it was good. I didn't think it was great.
I thought it was a decent ad for.
It was a decent explainer of who I am.
Yeah.
I thought it could have been a little better. I thought it spent a little too much time on war, especially for a Democrat. But I didn't have a complaint about a lack of policy initiatives and whatnot.
Yeah,
This is a hey, here's who I am ad, because he is in the congressional district with the lowest amount of votes of any congressional district. So it's not like he has a statewide presence, and he really does have to introduce himself to voters, and he's got to do that pretty quick, because at some point outside Republican groups are going to start trying to define.
Well, yeah,
him.
he's trying to define himself, and in that respect, I thought it was a good ad.
Yeah,
And-
I thought
and-
it was a good ad for that.
In fact, I remember thinking when I first saw it, like, this is the kind of ad that actually Martha McSally should have started her campaign off in 2018 in that Senate run back then, because it is the foundation. Like, here's who I am.
Yeah, his story and the values that come out of his story are always been what he's been running on. It's very much a part of him. I mean, he's not going to shy away from talking about his service and the what he learned, the friendships he developed, but also the challenges he had as a result of being in some of the in full disclosure, he's a friend of mine, right? But being in some of the absolute most intense fighting in that war. Ruben was a part of that stuff, and it's a part of who he is. And I'm sure we'll see guys that fought with him that are going to come out and campaign for him, like they did last time. I mean, in his primary,
And like
they tried
did
to make
for
the case
McCain in
that
the
he was
past.
kind of not really. He was exaggerating his military service.
Yeah.
And a thing that I remember, just as a friend of his, all of a sudden I started seeing on my Facebook page videos of him in Iraq, because his friends, who they they recorded this stuff on their phones, started posting, being like, "That's BS. This is our guy, right?" And so it's a big part of who he is. It's going to be a super nasty campaign. It's smart for him to spend the money now to try and to try and
I think that's the point, is define who you are because Carrie Lake is going to have money, and she's going to be able to. You're skeptical. You're skeptical.
Well, I mean, she'll certainly have some money. She will not have Martha McSally or even certainly not Mark Kelly sums of money.
No, well, Mark Kelly's a rare breed of fundraiser.
Yeah, but I mean, she may get to Blake Masters' amount of money. Just 15 million or 20 million, something like that. She may get there. And she may also get help from outside groups, whereas Blake really didn't. So she may have that. But I think both Rubin and the Democratic outside groups are going to vastly outspend Carrie Lake and Republican groups.
And stick with Carrie Lake. Carrie Lake filed her signatures on Friday, as just hours before we began taping. This 10,000 and some change as far as signatures. Ruben turned in 14,000. And you've been in the game long enough. There's always somebody will call you like, "Oh my God, we've got so many more, or so many less signatures than them." It's not that big of a deal, is it?
It's even less of a big deal. It's not really a deal. I mean, I'm sure she could have gotten 14,000 or 14,000.
Well, it's tough to collect signatures at Mar-a-Lago, right? They're not registered voters. She's spending her time on the campaign trail in Iowa and all these places and so maybe if she was walking around, I'm joking, obviously. They're all being,
I don't understand
other people being paid to collect these.
I don't understand why she did it on a Friday. And actually, I bet she didn't spend hardly any money at all. I'm sure a lot of them came through Equal,
the online.
I'm sure
lots of volunteers. I'm sure she didn't spend much money collecting signatures. And look, as long as she gets the minimum, that's all that matters.
That's all that matters.
But I
Get your
think
spot
that
on
it
the
is,
ballot.
to the extent that it's an indication of the fact that she has her brand, she has tremendous grassroots support. She has this big email list. But when you're looking at it from, it's clear that a lot of that's from out-of-state people. She's a national figure. So the fact that she wasn't able to just from email get more of these signatures, I do think is an interesting thing. I don't think it matters, but it's a thing to look at.
Look, Carrie Lake is big in the Iowa Republican Women's Club. There's no doubt about that. And if she can harness those types of groups to bring in money, then that's certainly going to help her. You know, her national profile will help her raise some money, undoubtedly, but you know, she needs to turn. You know, she had a rally last night, and you know, one of the first real big rallies of her since she started to change into the moderate Republican that we all know that she is.
You're being facetious, of course.
For the record, she is not a moderate.
No, I'm sorry, she's not. She keeps telling me in her emails and her, you know, to supporters, and that's actually the thing. She needs to start talking to her diehard supporters that we need to love all Republicans. You know, the rhinos, save a rhino. You know, she needs to start telling them
That's
that.
Republican in name only, like they accuse you all the time of being Mr. Marson.
Yeah, sure. So I just, you know, this is going to be a long campaign. This is long 7 months. And, you know, she's feisty. Ruben is feisty. And, you know, I think one of the most instructive things about how this campaign is going to go is when she confronted Ruben outside the men's room at Sky Harbor, right? I thought that was interesting. And, you know, Ruben certainly didn't back down. And, you know, that she was mic'd up as she normally is. And so I think that you're going to see these two going at it.
Yeah.
I mean, his campaign team comes from the Fetterman world, you know, so they, you know, that the dynamics of that race at that time were similar, where people thought this is somebody who's, you know, they thought he was more left than he actually is, and they were able to sort of highlight him, and he was running against a far right figure and the Dr. Oz thing, you know, and so like that's a good team. And I know that Lake has brought in more of these national figures who are trying to sort of moderate her and tell her what to do, but the problem is she exists in this bubble. Like, it doesn't matter. She's gonna go on the Steve Bannon show, and Steve Bannon's gonna pump her up for the stuff that she does, and so it's going to be a real challenge for her to pivot. Aside from all that, she's extraordinarily well known.
Yeah.
And people got exhausted with all of this election denial stuff over the past like 2 years, and her favorables are like in the 20s. And it's not that she's unknown. Ruben has unknowns. It's a fight to define him. For her, it's an uphill battle to get people to change their minds.
Yeah.
There's no need for her to go on the Steve Bannon show. Those are already her people. She's not going to win any votes doing that. She needs to, you know, really show Arizonans that she's not the anti-McCain,
Tell Meghan McCain that,
Republican.
though.
Yeah, right. Well,
yeah.
No, look, Meghan McCain, I don't know that she's a voter in Arizona, is she?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah,
but
so-
you know, she'll be there reminding everybody
Yeah,
that
I
you know,
know.
that she thinks that Carrie Lake is anti-McCain.
Yeah, look, Carrie Lake will probably live or die by what happens at the top of the ticket, right? I mean, I don't imagine there will be a lot of Trump Gallego voters.
No.
Or Biden Lake voters, right? So, as goes Trump, will go.
Bizarrely, there will be
there will
be
somebody out
Like,
there.
sort of those things you see on social media, the far right people, they're like, there's absolutely no way there was somebody that voted for Ducey and voted for Sinner. I'm like, what? Yes, there is. There's a bunch of them.
Yeah, there are a bunch of those, but I don't know that there will be a lot of Trump Gallego voters.
I imagine there'll be less of that then.
All right, let's wrap it up there, guys. We got St. Patty's Day coming up, though, when this pod drops on Sunday. So, any traditions?
I'm a Russian Jew, so no.
When I was in D.C., when I used to live in D.C., I came up with a thing where we would always go to like a Mexican restaurant during St. Patrick's Day because like they would be empty and they would treat us like gods, and then we'd do the same thing
on Cinco de Mayo or something.
On Cinco de Mayo, we'd go to the Irish pub, but I will do nothing but stay at home with the baby. I have no life.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So
my sister-in-law, you know, because I married into an Irish family, so they'll be drinking probably a little later than normal. I think like starting at 8 a.m. or something. But I mean, you know, they're gonna, you know, try and sleep in a little bit on this grand holiday and then start drinking pretty early.
Yeah.
Go to the parade or whatever. And
yeah, when I was younger, it was a kind of a good drinking holiday for me, you know. But you know, Sunday at most, probably, you know, hoist a pint of Harp or something like that and call it a day. So, hey, thanks for stopping by here, guys.
Yeah,
Enjoy
thanks.
the conversation, as always. And, by the way, I resent the implication that you think my podcast is second rate to the TV show.
Oh, no, it's like third. No. It's like third rate. Let's get that clear. It's
But the thing is, you get to ramble more. Like you
ramble.
Well, you know what the great thing about the podcast is, Dennis, is the last quite literally 3 times that you have had me on and check the tape. People like Tony have, just slammed the hell out of me. And the very next line is, well, that's all the time we have today. And I'm just, my mouth is open like, well, I don't get to respond? Like, what the hell? So that's nice.
I wasn't going to disagree with him on the Kerry Lake stuff.
I actually got a chance to speak, so I guess that is nice. Whereas,
I think that's an unfair characterization that I have somebody or me or somebody slams you, and then we go to the next segment.
No, the show ends. It's not the next segment.
The segment or show ends,
yes.
and I think
if you go back and you look at the last few shows,
that's unfair, Barrett. It's unfair.
Unfair, but true.
But we'll remind
Barrett, this is why Kerry Lake has somebody follow her around, videotape her whenever she interacts with the media. Because
you can't trust people like that.
Well, and this is why I'll just remind people that when we worked together at the newspaper many years ago, we had a managing editor who said that when Barrett left for greener pastures, he sent out an email that said that Barrett Marson did, quote, some good work. And with that, we're going to have to go on to the next segment. Thanks a lot for joining us. Bastard. And welcome back to the second half of the Politics Unplugged podcast. I'm joined again with Colin. Say hi, Colin.
Hi, happy to be here.
Hey, just want to start off, too. We were having a lot of fun with Barrett Marson. I did work with him in the newspaper back in the day. He was a really terrific reporter back then. Obviously, he actually covered the legislature before I was promoted to go down there. And the boss who did send out that email, let's just say this, Colin, I wouldn't put him on my Mount Rushmore of favorite bosses. Is that the diplomatic way
I think that's diplomatic, yes.
Of saying that? I mean, this guy was universally kind of disliked in the newsroom back in the day.
So you're suggesting that more than some of his work was good?
I am suggesting that more some of his work is good. And in fact, he broke some pretty important stories back in the day. My favorite story that I remember him breaking, actually, was the fact that then Governor Jane D. Hall was using the state plane to fly home every weekend, or to her home she owned in Prescott or up north somewhere every weekend. I thought that was just a terrific, good old school, old-fashioned like watchdog reporting thing that this governor is using state resources for her personal benefit.
Yeah.
It's
not that far a drive, man. Come on. Just drive it. He has some pretty scenery once you get off I-17.
So it's always, we were like, just before we get started here, like, just want to bring everybody up to speed here. Like, before, we started doing this, the second night before, we were trying to decide, what we should be talking about. Because, like, normally we do this on the Thursday before the Friday that we tape this. But I was actually home, took a day off, wasn't here. So we were just kind of chatting beforehand. Like, man, what do you want to talk about with this? And like you brought up, like, hey, you want to talk about RFK, Robert Kennedy Jr. and his VP pick. And it's like, yeah, one of his VP picks could be, Aaron Rodgers. And I thought, like, politics and sports, that's like right in our wheelhouse.
Yeah, that's solidly there. Yeah. All he needed was like an obscure 80s alternative musician as the other pick, and he would have been right there.
Yeah, if he would have picked, who would that be? Would have been great, like, if he'd have picked Aaron Rodgers or Henry Rollins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And it would have made about as much sense. I mean, to be fair. There's just something funny about the big story is, oh my God, his running mates could be Aaron Rodgers or Jesse the Body Ventura.
Yeah, who has political experience.
And when you look at that, my first thought was, of the three of them, Jesse the Body Ventura is like the least objectionable.
Yeah.
And by the way, I am of a generation where he is Jesse the Body Ventura.
Yeah.
He could be president. He would be President Jesse the Body Ventura. And I want to see the State of the Union with the feather boa that he wore as Jesse the Body Ventura.
Sure. Yeah, and I remember from movies like Predator and stuff like that. I mean, my question when I heard that is like, if Jesse the Body Ventura, if he doesn't have enough time to bleed, how could he be vice president?
I don't know.
And if you haven't seen the movie Predator, it's a thing.
I think as VP, he'd probably have plenty of time to bleed. That's not a schedule that's all that fall. He can do whatever he wants. Do the Wordle.
But Aaron Rodgers is VP. Like, how incorrigible. This guy is just, I'm just over it.
Yeah. And
this is darkness retreats and his ayahuasca and his I'm better than you attitude.
Yes.
I'm smarter than you attitude.
Yes. Suddenly everyone understands why no one in his family has talked to him for years.
Yeah.
And I think it tells you a lot about Aaron Rodgers that. So when the reports came out that he had questioned Sandy Hook and said Sandy Hook didn't happen and it was the hoax, yada yada, and he comes out on Twitter with his defense, which was the events of Sandy Hook were tragic. I have not questioned the events of Sandy Hook. Mm-hmm. And all I can think of, and I know I'm not alone in this, is will someone please ask him what he says the events of Sandy Hook are? Because we know the semantic games he plays. Yeah. He never once said he thought the shooting of children was tragic. He said the events of Sandy Hook. And what are they?
The other thing, and look, to be really clear, I do not follow everything from Aaron Rodgers, but being a fan of sport ball, I do from time to time read these stories about him because they're so weird.
Yeah. Also a 9/11 truther.
Yeah, they're so weird. But like what he also say, he'll say something kind of nutty, and then he'll say like, "What? I'm just raising questions."
Yeah.
One of those says like, "Well, this insane thing. What? I didn't say. I'm just raising questions."
Yeah.
It's just like it's exhausting.
Yes.
The
classic not as smart as he thinks he is guy.
No, again, I think he sounds like he sounds like what. God, there's a description of Joe Rogan that I think is apt for Rodgers. Is Rodgers sounds like what dumb people think a smart person sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is
largely it. Yes.
And I completely encourage skepticism and hard questions and thinking outside the box, and that's great. But there's a line there where you just and Sandy Hook is so far beyond that line.
Yes. No, it's loathsome.
It's pretty reprehensible. I mean, kids were murdered.
Yeah.
Kids.
Yeah. And RFK Jr. is considering having him as a running mate.
Yeah, and that tells you about how serious that anybody should really take him.
Yes.
Correct?
Also, back to the sports end of it, the end of last year, which didn't go well for the Jets after he played, I think, 3 snaps, and then the 4th snap was his Achilles. And the season went poorly. He said that what they really needed to do was get the distractions. The problem with the Jets was all the distractions. They had too many distractions. They needed to get rid of the distractions and just focus on football. And by the way, I might be running for vice president during the season.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a distraction, is it?
No, not at all.
I mean,
not at all. No, having reporters at the post-game press conference asking him whether he believes in Sandy Hook won't be a distraction.
No. It's just like, tell me about the 4th quarter drive and your plan on the border.
Yeah.
Not a distraction.
Not a distraction.
Not a distraction.
Yeah.
Oh, good Lord. Yeah. Has he said anything, and maybe you have paid more attention to this, has he said anything, responded to this at all since this came out?
Just the Twitter post saying that he has not questioned the events of Sandy Hook. The events of Sandy Hook were a tragedy. But did not clarify what the event.
Yeah, somebody's going to ask. Somebody's going to ask him that.
I hope so.
I would hope on day 1 of training camp for Jets if he hasn't asked that question. And and at that point, if you're a sport ball owner, why would you want to keep this guy on your team?
Because they don't have a backup. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that's a good answer, but that's the answer. They don't.
But at what point?
how far from Aaron Rodgers' politics do we think the average NFL owner's politics are? Is it Woody Johnson, the owner of the Jets? I don't know where his political affiliations lie, but I know, generally speaking, I don't think NFL owners are terribly far from where Aaron Rodgers lies on a lot of things.
That's a nice way to put that, Colin.
Yeah.
If you get what Colin's laying down. All right. Well, and the other thing is we were going to talk a little bit about, we got St. Paddy's Day coming up.
Yeah.
We were talking about, like, if you want to talk a little bit about Irish musicians.
Yeah.
But then we kind of like delved into this conversation about if anybody's ever read the book or seen the movie High Fidelity.
Yeah. A great book and a great movie.
I would like to talk to you a little bit about that, because we both kind of agree. If you haven't seen High Fidelity, it's basically about, it takes place in Chicago, and it's about the book takes place in England, but the movie, it's in Chicago. John Cusack, he's
championship final.
Yeah, signed it, and it was filmed at a real record store in Chicago called Tracks and Wax. Been there in Chicago, go there. But it's about a guy whose girl breaks up with him, and he owns a record store, and it's about him dealing with this breakup.
Yes.
But there's a lot of scenes in the record store, and Colin and I both agree that it's kind of we identify with way too much of this.
It hit way too close to home, and the jarring thing is when the specific thing we brought up, Jack Black at one point is talking to someone who is an Echo and the Bunnymen fan, and he learns that they do not have Psycho Candy by the Jesus and Mary chain.
Yeah.
And he starts berating them for not having Psycho Candy by the Jesus and Mary chain. If you're an Echo and the Bunnymen fan, how could you not have this? And it's played for laughs. It's supposed to be broad.
But we both agree it's a true valid point.
How can you not have Psycho Candy if you're an Echo and the Bunnymen fan?
Right.
I have everything by Echo and the Bunnymen on vinyl. I have Psycho Candy by the Jesus and Mary chain on vinyl. How could you not?
Well, it too, like the judging, that went on in the record stores back in the day.
Yes.
Like, I used to hang out at East Side Records all the time, and there was a guy that worked there, and I lived at record stores. And there was a guy that worked there, and kids would come up and like, I want to buy this. And like, I would see him sometimes take a CD or a record, like throw it across the room, and like, not on my watch, kid. I'm not allowing you to buy that.
Yeah. We had the Tower Records in town where they would be playing death metal to the point where your ears would bleed. Mm-hmm. Like you'd eventually just have to walk out because you couldn't, the headache had gotten too bad, and they would just kind of stand there smirking.
Yeah, no, it was all like way too close to home. The record store stuff, I want to say, not the breaking with the girl breaking up part, like, whatever.
Yeah. No, good movie. The record store stuff was dead on and hilarious.
Yeah.
And I just sat there watching the whole Jesus and Mary chain discussion going, God, this is me.
Yeah. Or like the time with Jack Black telling this guy, it's like, oh, you're a Dylan fan, but you don't have Blonde on Blonde? I mean,
How does that happen?
Yeah. Like that should be the first Bob Dylan record you own.
Yeah.
Or Blood on the Tracks.
Blood on the Tracks.
Yeah, Blood on the Tracks.
Those are your options.
Yeah.
You can start veering off into other directions. Some of the early stuff.
Sure. Maybe if you want to go a little bit like less electric, more bluegrass folk, pick up the early stuff.
Yes. Yeah. You can go more country-ish to the Nashville era. Later stuff like Infidels.
Everybody's like, in general, says, "Oh, I just don't like Bob Dylan's voice." Like, I'm fine with Bob Dylan's voice. I do not like his voice on Nashville because he sounds like
it gets weirdly nasal.
It gets weirdly nasal and Kermit the Froggish.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an odd phase. I like a lot of it, but yeah, it was different.
Yeah, in 80s Bob Dylan, I'm not. No.
The funny thing is, in the middle of 80s Bob Dylan, he put out Infidels, which I think is 82.
Okay.
It's brilliant.
Okay.
It's great. The few that came before it are bad. It was sort of, he had just come out of his born-again Christian phase, which was not a great era for him. And then after that, it got really 80s and terrible. He put out some real clunkers after Infidels. Infidels itself is brilliant.
Okay. I'm not familiar with that. I'll have to go check it out because
I
gave up like pretty much After mid-70s Bob
Yeah.
Dylan, like
No,
shortly.
good reason to.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, this is kind of garbage now.
Yeah. Yeah. Once you got to serve somebody, you think, yeah, this might be done. It might be at the end. And he still does terrific stuff. I mean, he had a revival, and a lot of his stuff is still very good. I have not seen him live, and I'm going to keep it that way.
Yeah.
Notoriously.
No, there's no reason to now.
No.
No. But speaking of the other scene we talked about, because we were talking about Irish musicians, was the band Stiff Little Fingers.
Yeah.
It has a cameo in High Fidelity,
Yeah.
the movie,
Yeah.
because I think one of the record store clerks is telling this girl who is a fan of Green Day, he says, well, I think there are two direct, influences on Green Day. One is The Clash, and the other is Stiff Little Fingers. And I think Stiff Little Fingers has benefited greatly
Yes.
from that
And
reference
gratefully, yes.
in that movie.
Yes.
And then they play a little bit of Stiff Little Fingers.
And what's great about that is it's such a perfect pretentious record store guy reference.
Oh, yes.
Because I'm not saying it's wrong. I mean, I can kind of hear it, but that's not something a record store guy says because he really thinks it. It's what a record store guy says because he wants you to know that he's familiar with Stiff Little Fingers and is going to make that comparison.
It's a flex.
Yes.
And I'm guilty of it
Yes.
all the
Oh,
time.
sure.
Even today, and I hate myself for it. I really am.
Yeah.
It's like,
No, I
I'll
get
make some
it, yeah.
obscure reference.
Yeah.
It's like, well, and there's scenes in that where the record store clerks are arguing about whether he said the name of the song correctly or arguing. It's like, I was referring to an album that was only released in Japan. Like, I know those conversations
Yes.
and have had those
Yes.
exact conversations.
Yeah.
It's
I've been
insane.
an asshole. Yes. Yeah. Best song by Stiff Little Fingers, Alternative Ulster. That's my little flex.
That's your little flex right there, because now I'm stumped, because now I can't think of a...
No reason why you should.
No.
But Alternative Ulster by Stiff Little Fingers. Great
Okay.
song. Yeah.
Well,
One of the best bands to come out of Northern Ireland.
you pretentious
That's right.
bastard.
That's right. Not just Irish, Northern Irish. Undertones, also Northern Irish. Van Morrison, Northern Irish.
So what are you saying here? You only
I
like the
don't know.
Northern... was it the Catholic Ireland or the...
That would be the North. Well, yeah.
Belfast?
Depending on which side you're on, yeah. My family decidedly on the Catholic side of the issue in Northern Ireland.
So besides listening to your extensive collection of Northern Irish bands,
Yes.
Any traditions for St. Patty's Day?
No, I've always sort of resented the whole get drunk on St. Patrick's
Yeah.
Day thing as someone of Irish descent, so I kind of leave it alone. I'll be going to a spring training game on Sunday.
Oh, man. Did we do a podcast a few podcasts ago how we hate spring training? Calling you out, Colin. Holding you accountable.
I kind of went there so much as, it's gotten insanely expensive, and it's not what it used to be, but it should still be fun.
Yeah, no, I'm just going to wait a few more weeks and go see a game that counts. That's my plan.
And it'll probably be cheaper.
It probably will be.
But one of the nice things is when your favorite team plays your other favorite team.
Oh, you're an Angels fan too.
I'm an Angels fan.
God, you and Barrett, the misery, the pain.
Oh God. So yeah, Angels Diamondbacks this weekend for St. Patrick's Day. So that'll be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have no plans. My a buddy of mine, he DJs. He's a thing called Sensitive Sunday. The idea was come and listen to easy music and overcome your hangover.
All right.
So he'll be doing that. I would tell you when, but maybe I don't want you all to show up. Maybe I want to get away from y'all.
He'll be helping you overcome your hangover on St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
Is it preventative or for those?
No, it's every Sunday in
back-to-back,
general.
'cause
It's like
Saturday night,
help over a little hair of the dog on.
Yeah.
On Sunday, this place, has some pretty good food and good drinks and stuff like that. And he'll be spending some, it's akin to yacht rock.
Okay.
Just like easy going. I got an easy kind of.
So here's my constant yacht rock question. Because
remember, Morgan Lowe works here.
I know, and he's
And Morgan
generally my
Lowe
go-to for yacht rock stuff.
Morgan Lowe is the Captain Steubing of yacht rock.
He is, and I think I know where he falls on this. But Steely Dan,
Ooh,
because I don't think of them as yacht rock.
No, but they got vibes.
They do, and I think the hardcore yacht rock people want to adopt them. I think Morgan probably falls on the yes.
Yeah, why wouldn't you want to adopt Steely Dan? Because they're awesome.
They're awesome, but I don't know that I'm throwing them in there with, Pablo
Captain
Cruz
and Tennille,
and Christopher Cross, and whatever else we're putting. Toto. Toto's probably in there.
I don't want to think about Toto.
Yeah, that's fair.
Don't.
That's fair.
Don't want to think
Okay.
about Toto.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I don't know. Maybe we'll bring Morgan on the pod next week to break down yacht rock and ask him the important question on everybody's lips is Steely Dan. Yeah, I'm with you. They've got vibes. They fit within that. I mean, if you're DJing, you're playing a set list of yacht rock stuff, and you throw in a Steely Dan, that's not going to raise any eyebrows, unless let's say if you threw in, I don't know, Rain in Blood from Slayer.
Yeah, that's not going to fit.
In between a Michael McDonald jam and a Captain and Tennille.
I'm just thinking like What a Fool Believes is like sitting on a yacht music.
Yeah.
And Sailing by Christopher Cross is sitting on a yacht music. Oh, most Steely Dan is more like sitting in your sports car in a parking lot with the engine running while your assistant's inside making the cocaine buy for you. Ready to punch it.
I mean, yeah, there's plenty of
goes down.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of stuff out there. Like I don't know, like there's certain songs from War that have like yacht rock vibes, like Spill the Wine.
Spill the Wine.
If you throw Spill the Wine on, it's like
probably not Lowrider.
Oh God, it should be.
I just don't know that I'm going Lowrider with that.
No, but I'm just saying there's certain songs out there. Yeah. That doesn't mean you're in the yacht rock family. Or
sure.
Is it family?
Probably.
I don't know. I don't know. But yeah. Anyway, but yeah, no real plans other than that. Then for St. Paddy's Day. Plus, my mom's German, and the rest of me is probably a mix of Irish, Scottish, Welsh, and and all that other kinds of stuff. So
yeah, I've got to start with that. It's funny. I don't know if most families are like this, but I have great extensive knowledge of my mother's father's side, and he immigrated from Northern Ireland, probably not entirely by choice. And the rest of the family, I have no idea.
It's like my dad's side of the family. We don't know because his grandfather, his grandpa would never ask, like, tell what when they would say, like, what are we? And he would just say American Yankee.
All right.
Like, that's okay. There you go.
My mom's mom family was Polish. Know nothing about their background.
Oh, I know a ton about my mom's the background.
Yeah.
She's a German immigrant. I don't want to bore you all with the details, but yeah.
Yeah. Extensive knowledge of the Irish side and the rest. Okay.
All right. Well, there you go. Hey, everybody, enjoy your St. Paddy's Day, and we'll see you next week, right?
Yeah, see you then.
All right.
Thanks for listening. You can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, the Google Store, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. See you next time.